good.
We're on.
Hi.
We're on, but nobody else is.
We're on. It's just us. Okay, I can see if we can find
There's
us.
2 people.
So somebody found us, so I should be able to find us too.
4 people. Ooh, that one's acidic.
I was gonna say you just drooled. Okay.
Hi, everybody. We're just sitting here
Hello.
drinking alone. Well, we're not alone.
We're not alone. We're together.
We're together, and you're here, so we're definitely not alone. How is everybody? It's Monday.
It is.
It's wine tasting on your couch.
No, we're not alone.
We're not alone. We're together.
We're together, and you're here, so we're definitely not.
Repeat.
Please forgive the 7-second delay.
Yes.
If anybody can name the artist, I can't even name the song.
That's actually a song.
What's a lyric out of a song? The artist is a really, really good artist, and I'll give everybody a hint. I don't know if it's appropriate for Facebook. My hint.
Then you shouldn't even say anything. Chuck and Kim are here. Kim, did you get your barrel? I heard you did.
She did. It's
So-
at least, well, somebody got her barrel because it's not at the shop anymore.
Somebody got it. So Kim, if it wasn't you, we need to
Investigate.
figure that out. Hi, Chris. And I know Melissa's here too. Hi, Melissa. Probably Bart with you.
Chris
So,
is here
hi,
alone.
Diane.
Sarah's not on.
She's on it in a little bit. She'll be on later.
Oh, okay.
So, and yes, Kim got her barrel. We're glad it was you.
Yeah. Please excuse the 7-second delay. Is a song. It's a lyric in a song by Donald Fagen from the album The Nightfly.
Okay.
Donald Fagen was one of the
Hi, Elaine.
founding members of Steely Dan.
Oh,
And my clue was going to be the band named after
device.
a device and not an artificial heart.
Right. So,
Steely Dan was named after a device from a movie. That's what they called this device in this movie.
well, okay. We can move on to something else.
All right, so we're going to taste wines from Portugal tonight.
Before we get started, I do want to apologize. Our last wine tasting, we said that tonight was going to be California. Unfortunately, when we ordered the wines and they came in, we ended up getting the wrong wine. So we were going to do a Zin, a Cab, and a Chardonnay. And we got 2 cabs. We didn't want to do that. So we sent that wine back, did get the new one in, but in the meantime, decided we needed to start selling our wine and needed to get you guys opportunity to have the wine. So we're flip-flopped. Tonight is Portugal, and California, which was supposed to be tonight, will be the 26th,
26th,
which is in
April 26th, in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2 weeks from tonight. So
That's we're going to
apologies.
do Clone Napa Chardonnay, Clone Napa Cabernet, and the Precision Zinfandel. So 3 wines from California, which is not tonight. These are 3 wines from Portugal. 3 wines that if you spent any time perusing the sheets, they are very, very similar blends. So all of them are blends. And all of them have, well, at least the first 2 have pretty much the exact same grapes. And the last one has some different grapes. And if it's from Portugal, you got to expect it's going to be different grapes because Portugal is like full of different grapes. And certainly they're full of different grape names, even though they might be grapes that you're familiar with, like grapes known by another name, which are just as sweet as the other name.
What?
It's like a Shakespearean reference.
Okay.
You were a Shakespeare.
I did take some Shakespeare stuff.
Go ahead,
but
quote something. You always like try to quote.
Cat. It's the one about Cat. Kiss Me, Kate. That's actually the remake of it. But shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperament.
Temperament or temperament?
Temperate. Temperate.
Okay.
I have a lovelier temperament. So.
Lovelier than who?
Then the summer's day. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day?
You have a more lovely temperament than a summer's day?
Sometimes.
Sometimes not.
Sometimes not, yes.
All right. So let's jump into wines. 3 wines from Portugal. So I'm going to talk more about Portugal just in general. I'm going to show you a map, of course.
Imagine that.
And I know you're not going to wait for me to start drinking before you start drinking. So go ahead and start drinking. So I've got a couple maps. I'm going to pull them up here and show you. So yes. So it's not the Iberian Isthmus.
Oh, we lost the sound. So.
Oh, did you lose the sound when I
Yes.
just had the map up? Okay. All right.
Sorry about that.
Sorry. So I'll redo this now. So you see that. Sorry about that. There's the map, and you see Spain right in the middle. The Iberian Peninsula. You've got Africa to the south. You got France to the north. You got Portugal that lies right on the west coast of the Iberian Peninsula, and the town of Lisbon you see right there. That's the region that we're going to be focusing on, the region of Lisboa, which is a regional designation, and that's one of the most prolific wine growing regions of the area, especially of still wines. Still wines meaning not sparkling, not fortified. If you go north, you see I think that's the town of Porto right there. That's where port is primarily made, and if it's from the Douro Valley of Portugal, and it's called Oporto. That's what it is in Portugal. So that's where port is made. This is down by Lisbon is where we're going to be focusing on. There's 9 sub-regions in the region. I'm not going to get into that a lot because these are regionally designated wines. It's kind of like saying that wine is California designated, even though like within California, you've got a whole bunch of other sub-regions. This is just a regionally defined area.
One of the things I think that I asked about when you didn't have sound, apologies, was if the Iberian Peninsula actually included Spain, which Ron said it did. And then he also, and I think this is just when we're coming back on, he also said it includes just the southern
portion of France.
Portion of France. So that's all the Iberian Peninsula.
It was named for the Iberian peoples, like during some wars and conquerors and things like that.
Way before our time.
Way before our time.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You probably missed the discussion of the Iberian Isthmus too, but we won't get into that. Let's see, what else can I tell you? You may see older wine references. This region used to be called Extremadura, and so you may see reference to that if you read about the region. Diverse soils and climate and grapes, mostly clay and limestone soils. It's right on the ocean, so you get a lot of that maritime influence. It can be very, very windy there. So they talk about the grapes being sort of like wind-worn or sort of, wind-hardened kind of thing. There's a lot of other windy regions, wine regions in the world, and they trellis them differently and all sorts of things. So
Trellis.
So trellis is where you see the grapevines all in a row, and they're on wires in
You
varying
can't necessarily see the wire.
configuration.
It's where the canopy, the greens, are directed.
Yeah, and it also controls where the fruit hangs,
Right.
which is one of the primary reasons. That's
why the greens are directed, so the low-hanging fruit.
correct. Can be more easily harvested.
Yes.
It also does things like in like the Vino Verde region of Portugal. And we've talked about this because I think we had a wine from Spain that was grown on pergolas. So it was grown way up high because there's so much moisture in the air that it allows for the wind to dry out the grapes. So there's a lot of reasons for different ways to trellis grapes. Can be the density, so how closely they're planted. If they're a little bit wider, they might support more clusters per vine on a certain trellising. They have double T's and cordon, all sorts of things. So this is like a whole lesson.
This is an entire lesson, and
It
it's
could be.
fascinating.
It is fascinating. And it also allows you to do microclimates. So we've talked about climates a lot. We talk about regional climates and sort of vineyard climates and site climates. They actually talk about microclimates within the canopy of the leaves, where they can control sort of things with temperature and sun exposure. If it gets really, really hot in the afternoon, they might leave more foliage on the, sun sets in the west, so on the west side of the vines to prevent sunburn on the grapes. I mean, all sorts of things that they can do to manipulate kind of how the plant grows.
So these three are all from the same town area?
Same region, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Which is named for that town?
It's named for the town of Lisbon.
Okay.
Yeah, now it is. It wasn't.
Okay.
So it's the, you've probably seen the bottle, it's the Vino Regional Lisboa, which is the wine region of Lisbon.
Okay.
Basically. Anything else to talk about?
Try it. So we have had these already. We tried them tonight, but we also had them before, and we did compare them at the time. So part of the reason we decided to do it is because I think sometimes it's fun to take three wines, inexpensive, $8.99. What a great price.
And $9 a bottle.
$9 a bottle. And compare what just a little bit of change does to them. And $9 a bottle. There's a lot of change going on with these.
Right. And the region is actually really known. This region, number one, they grow a lot of grapes. They make a lot of wine. It's really known for this sort of category of these easy drinkings, fruit forward, inexpensive wines that are just easy to consume. And this region is the biggest, I think, the biggest exporter of wines outside of Portugal. And they export a pretty large percentage of the grapes that they grow.
So
let's see what Diane says here. Question.
Diane's asking about the grapes, and I think she's asking about sunburn.
Yes.
You talked about sunburn.
Yes, it does. So sometimes they want it to shine directly on the grapes. Sometimes they don't want it to shine directly on the grapes, depending if they want them to ripen up. In fact, they'll actually prune the vine through the growing season. So as it gets near the end of ripening, or closer to harvest, they'll prune it so that perhaps they get more sunlight so that they can plump up and like ripen up a lot more and jack the sugars up a lot more.
Versus you don't want to do that when they're
probably not, because you want them to sort of grow, mature slowly. And also it could be weather dependent. I mean, again, I'm no viticulturist or anything.
You know a lot about sunburns.
No, well, that's just because I get them occasionally, especially on my head. So yeah, it's a consideration for sun and how things go.
Yes.
So go ahead and start swilling and smelling and sniffing, and I'm going to talk really briefly about this. So the grapes, the first two wines, we're going to taste them in this order: the Lisbonita, the Topo, and then the what's this one?
Ventos.
Okay, the Ventos. So between the Lisbonita and the Topo, the grapes are exactly the same grapes on the sheet. It seems like when we taste them with the rep, there was a difference on the bottle, but maybe not.
Oh, I don't remember that.
Actually, I don't even see on the bottle, so it must not.
So it must have been a different wine.
Right. But of course, just like a food ingredient, the ingredient that's first is the most predominant ingredient. I believe that is the same way that they label these. So if you look at it, you've got a little bit of flip-flop. There's more Syrah in the Topo than there is in the Lisbonita, and there's more Touriga Franca in the Lisbonita than in the Topo. So those two grape varietals are flipped. Castelao and Tinto Roriz are the two other grapes, so we'll talk about those. But anyway, let's swirl and smell and sniff and do all that good stuff.
And while you're doing that, Chuck wants to know about maceration. And Chuck, if I didn't get that correct, let me know. But I think you're asking about maceration.
Or is he asking about mace
Races.
mace rations?
I think he's asking about maceration.
It's like how many times you hit somebody with your mace if you're a knight. It's a mace. It's that spiky ball thing.
Oh, no, I didn't. Okay.
So maceration. We've talked a little bit about this, but we'll talk about it again. In the description, they say that maceration in contact with the skins. So they do a pressing after total destemming, fermentation, cement, steel vats, and then maceration in contact with skin. So maceration is where they just leave the juice in contact with the skins, and you'll see it done as a quote unquote cold soak, or you'll see it as, which is before the fermentation, or you'll see it as a post fermentation maceration where they leave it soak, after fermentation. Each of them has their own thing. I think one of the last tastings we talked about a cold soak or a cold maceration, which they do to extract color and things like that, that does not extract alcohol and tannin. Because when you have fermentation going on, fermentation creates heat. And with that heat, it extracts a lot of different things. It extracts the more harsh things out of the grapes, where a cold soak or a cold maceration will extract just mostly like color and a little bit of the other components. But it's a more mild approach to maceration. This one is maceration in contact with the skin. So this is during fermentation.
With a submerged cap.
Submerged cap.
This is interesting.
Yeah. So
we're getting geeky. Ron's in his
so
glory right now.
So we'll geek out a little bit. So the maceration on.
Maybe we ought to taste the wine and then geek out a little bit.
Well, they're already tasting the wine.
Okay. So this is all about this wine. Has nothing. Well, it does have something to do with what you're tasting.
Oh, it absolutely does.
Yes.
Yeah. So this the way it's written here, it's actually redundant because they're saying it's macerated, maceration in contact with the skins. Red wine is fermented on the skins. So
maceration has to happen.
So maceration always happens on the skin. So fermentation with red wine is always with skin contact. The skins are always in the fermentation. And so it's sort of like a redundancy thing. Whether it's a language thing or just the way they wrote it, it doesn't matter. The interesting thing is that they talk about the submerged cap. So there are, I guess, 3 primary ways to do that maceration of the skin. So what happens is, if you imagine that, let's say my wine glass is a fermentation tank. And if it were full, and I won't fill it up, but if it were full, all the skins in that fermentation tank, because the fermentation creates CO2, so CO2 bubbles up and the skins float to the top of the fermentation vat. When that happens, those skins are no longer in contact with the majority of the wine. And so that cap that's what they call the cap. So there's 3 primary ways to control this. They can do a pump over, which is where they hook a hose on the bottom of the fermentation vessel and they run it up over the top and they spray it in on top of that cap. That wine breaks up the cap and lets that cap sort of come in contact with that again. They also do things like where they do punch downs. And punch downs is where they use either a machine, or if they use a small vat, and back, before machines did it, is where they actually physically push the cap and break the cap up and push it back down into the wine.
It's kind of like if you're making soup and like you get something that floats to the top, and all the cooks out there would know this. You stir it. You get it to go back into so that you can continue to extract whatever it's going to offer.
Exactly.
So it's like that. But
exactly like that. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then one of the last ways to do it is a submerged cap. And a submerged cap is where they have this mechanism that's kind of like a screen that they put in on top of the cap and they push it down so they maintain it right in the middle of the vat of juice.
And punch downs, which is one of the ones Ron talked about, that's where they kind of manually do it. Well, it doesn't have to be manual.
Well, it's a physical action, whether a person does it or whether a machine on top of these vats actually pushes down.
And that is when we talk about price of wine. And if you've taken one of Ron's classes, people always ask, why is this bottle $9 and why is this bottle $90? It has to do with winemaking techniques. And if you're doing something by hand, like pushing that cap down, and it's this tool thing that kind of looks like kind of like a flat spatula or something or branding. It almost looks like a branding iron, a big branding iron.
Yeah.
They use it to push down the cap.
Or like a manual, like, you know, if you want to like flatten and harden soil, where you like manually do it, where you've got that square that I've got one of those.
Yeah. So that would be one thing that somebody who's making.
It's kind of the point of sort of like when people talk about crushing grapes with their feet. It's kind of that same mentality.
But doing that manually is much more expensive than having a device which holds the cap down.
It's also harder.
It's also harder. But then would that affect, of course, the price point?
Price point, certainly. Yep.
That doesn't mean that more expensive wines you don't do pour overs or pump overs or anything like that. But it is something that might go into the cost of a wine.
Right. And realistically, people aren't doing manual punch downs anymore unless they're doing fermentations in a small bin. When I say a small bin, I'm saying like a 4x4 square, maybe 4 feet tall or 5 feet tall. I don't remember how much fruit they hold, where you could basically stand at the side of it and manually push it down. If you're fermenting your wines in a 30,000 gallon tank, you're not going to manually do it anyway.
Right.
They've got a machine, or they mostly do pump overs.
Pump over, you take a hose from the bottom of the tank, bring it up to the top, and it basically pours over the top.
Right. And they can do that. They have a shower head, like they have a rotary shower head that can do it, or you'll see guys just holding the hose and like spraying it down on top of the cap.
Yeah.
They also, so most fermentation tanks you see in a vertical position, they have horizontal where they'll do a horizontal fermentation, and then they can actually rotate that whole fermentation vessel, and that just basically will churn the grape skins while that thing's rotating. It's kind of like I don't know, just like if you were like in a
blender,
like
sort of,
or like
like a blender,
or like a tumbler for stones. Like if you're like one of those smooth stones.
Okay.
Anyway, we spent a lot of time talking.
Talked a lot of time, but we had a good question, and it was actually it's relevant to all of these wines.
All right, so the grapes in this. The Castelao is a red grape of southern Portugal. The name means parakeet, and it is typically in its youth. It's very, very tannic and kind of harsh. And then with time, they sort of age. So that's Castelao. Tinto Roriz is another name for Tempranillo. So Tinto Roriz is the same grape as Tempranillo, which, if you played along with us, you know Tempranillo is the primary grape of Rioja. So it's a very well-known Spanish grape varietal. Tinto Roriz, same grape, different name because it's in Portugal. And then we've got Touriga Franca. Touriga Franca is one of the primary grapes used in the making of port, of fortified wines. And then you've got Syrah, and Syrah is an international varietal, quote unquote international varietal, Spanish or French varietal.
So let's talk about what we get in this, and then I want to talk about fortified wines, because that's really what Portuguese wines, what we often automatically think of. Of course, these are not fortified; these are still. So we'll talk about that distinguishing characteristic of wines momentarily. This wine, fruity. I get a lot of fruit. A little bit of, I don't know if it's quite earthiness, but something that isn't what I might call a little dirty. It's not just pure fruit. There's a little more going on. I don't know if it's mushroom but it's not all just fruit. So if anybody else is getting it, maybe that little acridness that you get, like the smell of a matchstick, but on the palate, not on the nose. I get a little floral on the palate, or I mean on the nose when I smell it. A little flowery. What's everybody else getting? And what are you eating with it? How's everybody doing on that? Food's always important. Elaine, we're Ron and I are still on the first one. And we are doing the Lisbonita first.
Yeah, I get a little dirty. I get a little almost a hint of stem. But not green per se. More like a stick stem.
Yeah.
Which you could say from the oak, but this is like, all these tech sheets are not specific on like the oak. So they all say, I think, partial aging in oak barrels, which probably means very minimal, not anything significant.
No, I can see that. That might come from the distemming technique, especially because these are not pricey wines, so they're probably not hand sorting. Or not doing a lot of hand sorting, maybe a little bit. I think stemmy, that might be what I'm saying is dirty. That's probably
And
it.
way on the back, way on the finish, like even now, I'm getting just like a little mushy apple.
Yes, it might be pear, but yes, something mushy, something that is, because we just had pears on the salad the other night. That might be what I'm getting.
I'm getting apple.
It might be that texture too. That feeling that you get when you get mushy. It's good. Very nice, decent. We should go on to the second wine. If you haven't already, sorry about that. Go on to the second one. Let's see how the top
You want to
goes.
talk about port?
Well, we can, but we should go on to the second one.
All right.
So if you're not on the second one yet, go ahead and go on to it. Ron will tell you what the grapes are. We'll talk about port and go from there.
So same exact grapes. The Castellao, the Tinto Reeds, aka Tempranillo, Syrah, Torriga Franca. So Syrah plays a little bit more dominant role in this wine. And when we tasted them, and so this is, I know we've had the question on here a lot where people say, can you really tell when there's just like a percentage, like a 1 or 2%? Now, of course, we don't know the percentage of the Syrah in here, but you got to imagine that, if there's 4 grapes, who knows what the percentage is, but there's probably more Syrah in this one. By how much, I don't know, but you're going to taste the difference.
In the second one, you
In
mean?
the second one, in the
Topo.
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 I say Topo, like a Topo man.
Makes sense. So Elaine and Diane are having the tomato peanut soup.
Oh,
We had tomato peanut soup before we started.
you did.
Spicy. Ours was spicy. I didn't have any peanuts, so I had to make shift, and we used a spicy crumb thing that I had made the other night, and it was spicy, but it was good. So we had that too. Yummy. One of my favorites. For all of you don't know, we make that at the shop, and I love that soup. So, onto the Topo. Oh yeah, I totally I can completely get the Syrah in here.
Like, it is a completely different wine in my brain.
And exactly the same grapes.
Exactly the same grapes, just different.
Different percentages.
Yeah. Now, I mean, they could be grapes sourced from different places. I mean, it could be different vineyards. It could be, who knows, right?
Yes.
I don't have that level of tech on these wines. So it could be totally different. This also only has the generic partial aging in oak barrels. So again, we don't know how long. We don't know any of that stuff.
It tastes better than it smells. I don't think that it doesn't smell
Also,
as good as I think.
the Lisbonita is a 2019. The Topo is a 2018.
Oh.
So that has a lot to do with the differences. That's why the second one, even though it has more Syrah, it's not as tannic, or it has Castellao, which is a tannic grape also. But it's got a year longer, so it's got a little bit more age. Plus, I don't know what the vintages were like between 2018 and 2019. So that's interesting.
That is interesting. So talk just a little bit about port, please.
Port.
And port and what fortified wines are versus what we're drinking, which are still wines from Portugal.
Sure. So 3 main categories of wines: sparkling, still, and fortified. Sparkling wines are champagne, bubbly. Still wines are like all the wines that we've been drinking. Wines that do not have CO2 in them from natural or other. And then the last one, and that are not fortified. And the last one is fortified. Fortified means a wine that was fortified with spirits. So with an alcoholic spirit, namely in the form of just a neutral grain spirit or a neutral grape spirit, mostly grape spirits. So the way that they do that, so the way port is made is you start the wine exactly like you start a still wine. You start the fermentation, starting to ferment. You might get to 4 or 5% alcohol, meaning there's a little bit of alcohol and still a lot of sugars left. You take a neutral grape spirit, put it into the fermentation vessels. Because the high alcohol, they end up being 18 to 22% alcohol. It kills the yeasts, so the yeasts stop fermenting the sugars, and so you end up with a high alcohol wine with still residual sugar because there's sugar left over that wasn't fermented out. What you looking at?
Chuck's just asking, we don't know anything about the percentages at all, but we can assume that the first listed grape has the majority of it is, or that's the biggest percentage.
That's what I am assuming.
Okay.
Yes, based on everything I know about how wines are labeled and having seen wines that are labeled with, their grapes in order, but with the percentage, and then having them be, decreasing in percentage. But yes, that is my assumption, is based on the labeling. They're listed from the largest percentage to the least percentage.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So that's what I was looking at.
Okay. Okay, so what are we getting in the Topo?
The Topo, I think the palate is much more integrated and not as, we were getting mushy apple and we were getting this and we were getting this. This is much more all kind of one flavor. And I think it's very nice.
And what about this wine would go to that?
The age.
The age, exactly.
The fact that it's a 2018 and the other one's a 2019. So this one has had a year longer to sit in the bottle, and this is not the right word, but I'm going to use it, stew, because all of us cook. You think about what happens. You let stuff sit in the pot and stew. It gets more integrated, and that's what I think. I can definitely taste that here. So it does not smell like it's going to be fruity, but it is on the palate. On the nose, I get a Syrah. You all know that means I get meat.
So one of the things, I think you come to, the last one, the Lisbonita, has more Touriga Franca. So Touriga Franca is a grape, can also be a little bit perfumey.
Oh, I didn't.
And I think
say
you
that,
comment, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Touriga Franca, it's a larger percentage of the first one, of the Lisbonita, and it does have that little perfuming character to it.
And I don't get that at all in the.
No, this one has a much darker. It's not meat or anything that you typically get off a Syrah.
No, but there's a little bit
darker,
of that. Yeah, maybe not quite salami, but there's something leaning in that direction.
I like salami.
I like salami too, not in my wine.
Do we have any salami?
We do.
What does salami?
Guess the tomato soup, tomato peanut soup wasn't enough for you.
Well, no, we're not done eating. There's a little tobacco.
Yeah.
I get like a little tobacco leaf.
I think our dog just woke up.
No, I think she's dreaming. She's over there squeaking.
Oh, you don't think she's awake?
No, I think she's.
Ryan asked if we could see her.
Well, we can see her, but I don't know if we.
Ryan asked if Ryan could see her.
Well, maybe at the end.
Maybe at the end. Yes.
She's like devil dog though at night.
Michael James tastes snoozeberries. Is that a thing?
Snoozeberries?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's from Willy Wonka.
Oh. And so we all know what that tastes like?
Snoozeberries or schnozberries.
I think you guys had this Willy Wonka conversation one other time, and
That's because Sarah's Jeep, she calls snoozeberry or schnozberry.
It's snazzleberry.
Okay,
Snazzleberry
whatever.
or whatever it is. I don't know. Chris, you're on. I saw that. Oh, there it is. Oh, wrong Chris. Sorry, Chris. Chris votes yes to seeing puppy. That's Cat. We talked about Cat at the very, very beginning. So, but other Chris on, the name of the color of their Jeep is Snazzleberry, I think. Not Schnoozleberry. So
maybe that's what he meant. Let's move on.
Snoozeberries. Thanks, Chris. Yes, let's move on. What else do you want to talk about with this wine? Did we get everything before?
I'm reading their notes. They talk about spices, chocolate, some oak notes.
Chocolate, yeah, maybe.
Velvety notes of red ripe fruits.
Velvety. I would say this wine is velvetier than the first wine, and I think that goes to the integration.
And so velvetier is oftentimes, to me, that's a textural description, right? Because people don't know how. It's mouthfeel, yeah. It's totally textural. It's not taste. And so they'll talk about tannins being rough or velvety or smooth or fine or supple or whatever you want to talk about tannins. So I think this one being velvetier also has to do with the age because the tannin's starting to bind and fall out.
I think your wife said that.
You said it was about the integration.
Which is because of the age.
Right, but it's not the tannin. Tannins are just falling out.
So
anyway, I like this wine. It's good.
I thought both of them were good.
So the interesting thing that I found curious on the backs of the labels, each of them I think says medium dry red wine. So medium dry in my little pea brain suggests that there might be a little bit of residual sugar, but I don't necessarily taste it. I don't think there is, but it's interesting that they all say medium dry, and the alcohol percentages are 13.5,
Oh,
13. But remember, it's a cooler climate because you've got the Atlantic Ocean, you got Mediterranean influences, so it's not like super hot. I don't know what the typical alcohols, but also that if there is just a little bit of residual sugar, it might actually go to the drinkability, the simplicity of the wine, and how it's really a crowd pleaser type wine, because a lot of people really like just that slight hint of sweetness, even though it's not sweet.
it is not sweet.
No,
but
it's not sweet at all.
No, I'm actually surprised they call it medium dry. Although they're not calling it off. Well,
Mm-mm. It's not off dry.
it's not off dry. So, but
No.
yeah, crowd pleaser. On to the next.
So the
Shall we?
Bonds Ventos.
Did you all notice how much more substantial this bottle was? When I was unpacking them the other day, I was like, what is with this bottle? It's, again, a $9 bottle. And I thought even just picking it up, it seemed much more was going on. So I'm kind of curious as if I'm going to get a lot more going on when we start drinking it.
So I think each of these text sheets, they talk about the clay and limestone soils. Even this text sheet. So when Loreen talked about the bottle size and the bottle dimensions. It's shorter, but it's heavier and a little squatter. There is something to be said that wines will be marketed not only by the label, but by the bottle size, the bottle shape, by the size of the punt. If you're not familiar, the bottom, like the hole, the cavity in the bottom of the bottle is called the punt. And if we feel through these, my guess is that this one's going to have, no, it's not. I just say it can have a deeper punt. Sometimes you'll get those bottles that are really big, but because the bottle is so big, it's still only 750 milliliters. So they have to take up the space somehow. So they make
Well,
the
it's not
punt.
the only reason.
What's that?
It's not the only reason.
It kind of is. If you got a really big bottle, it's physically larger than a normal bottle, but it's only going to hold 750 milliliters.
You got to use up that space.
You take up the space from the inside, which is why they have like really deep punts.
And really thick glass.
And really thick glass, right? But so you can often tell that this wine, just looking at these bottles, this bottle looks like a more substantial bottle. It could be a more substantial wine. Like a marketing thing.
Chuck just wants to know about off dry versus medium dry, and it's basically a scale. But if you could,
yeah. So dryness in wine. So dry and sweet are opposites in wine, and so a wine that is considered dry is like no residual sugar. Then you've got off dry, which would be just a little bit one step sweeter. Then medium dry, and then probably
I'd have to look at the
sweet.
scale. Probably off. Yeah, there's going to be
semi-sweet.
Semi-sweet, thank you.
Semi-sweet, and then sweet, and then luscious or something.
Dulce or something.
Oh.
So it's a scale. So off dry is more dry, less sweet than medium dry. Or am I backward? I think.
So
Dry,
I would think medium dry is going to be
off.
Is actually going to be sweeter than off dry.
Medium dry is going to be sweeter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which these wines aren't sweet.
No.
So maybe it's just the way they label them. I don't know.
Okay.
Does that make sense, Chuck? I hope that makes sense.
Scale of sweetness.
Scale of sweetness. Yeah.
Or not sweetness.
Right. Of residual sugar. And there's lots to be talked about when you can perceive sugar. I think it's like 1 gram per liter is the threshold by which most people can perceive sweetness. So there's too much to know, too much to talk about.
There's a lot to talk about.
Let's just drink.
Let's just drink.
Let's talk about the day.
So I had a class last week, Thursday and Friday, and it was about presenting online. And we watched other people present, just little snippets. And one of the things I noticed is that when one of the guys had his curtains open, you could see cars driving by. And that was really distracting. That's one of the things we talked about. Shouldn't talk so much with our hands. And I just noticed we're really talking a lot with our hands because you all find it distracting. So apologies. I'm going to try to hold my hands together so I don't talk so much with my hands. It's very different than presenting in real life. Whatever. Don't look at me that way.
Are our hands distracting? Little quick poll. So this wine is Touriga Nacional, Castelao, Camarate. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. And Tinta Miúda. I thought this is really interesting. So I learned something researching wines. You never know it all. It's impossible to. So Touriga Nacional is another grape varietal that is pretty much, you only see, well, now you see it in a lot of still wines, but it's really most well known for making port. And then we've got Castelao, which we've already talked about with the other wines. Camarade is also called Castelao Nacional. It is different. So it's Castelao Nacional, not Touriga Nacional. It's different, but related to Castelao, which is interesting because if you look at lineage of grapes and what has been crossed and bred with grapes to get other grapes. So the one that I always like to talk about most, because I think it's interesting, is that Cabernet Sauvignon is the offspring of Cabernet Franc and Sauvignon Blanc. So a red and a white grape hooked up and made a red grape. So when you start to look back, you can see why sorry, I'm talking to my hands. You can look back and see how
a little bit is fine.
See how grapes share characteristics of other grapes based on that lineage. So those two grapes are related. And the last grape is Tinta Miúda. Tinta Miúda is also known as Graciano. Graciano is a grape it's a red grape most famously grown in the Rioja region of Spain again. Of course, they're all Iberian Peninsula grapes, predominantly. So it's just really interesting that this has Graciano, because you might see Graciano labeled someplace else, and maybe you're familiar with it, maybe not. It's a blending grape you typically see in Riojas or wines from Rioja or other regions of Spain.
But we've had some 100%.
We have had.
Well, at least labeled Graciano, whether it's 100% or not. Don't know for sure, but
yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
All these things.
So this one actually talks about 3 to 4 months aging oak barrels. And because I think this wine is, even though it's the same price point, I think it's probably a little bit
more serious.
And they say 3 to 4 months in oak. It tells me that the other ones might have they were pushed past the oak barrel in the winery or something. I'm not sure.
What'd you say?
They're just pushed past the oak barrel. They weren't really aged in it. Just got the whiff of the barrel when they pushed it past.
So they were in their plastic vats and they pushed them by.
Right.
That's
the oak aging. Right.
That's not true.
That's not
just
true.
So y'all know that was Ron's
stupidity.
Yeah. He thinks he's funny.
I'm hilarious. At least I think so. And that's really the only thing that counts.
Yes. So I do agree this is a little bit more serious wine. Again, we're talking about a $9 wine. It's not like it's
right.
But maybe a little bit less hit fruit in your face. Maybe a little more.
It's more tannic.
Yeah.
It's also a 2018.
Okay. And this one actually, it does say medium dry, doesn't it?
Yeah, they all say medium dry.
Interesting.
This one is way less fruit.
Thanks, Chuck. He's agreeing with you.
What, that I'm hilarious?
That you're hilarious.
Thanks.
That's good.
It is good. It's nowhere near as fruit driven as the first two.
So the nice thing is we can go back.
We can.
The nose is really different. This one is, you said chocolate on the second one. I almost get more chocolate in this one. The third one. The one with the 2 words. Ventos.
So when so we're so used to tasting and using the language that we've sort of learned and adopted and made up along the way. When we say fruit driven, we mean that that's the predominant driver of the flavor profile.
Which is actually really pleasant. People really like it.
Absolutely.
It's a huge selling wine.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah.
But what you typically see, and I'm going to throw like a huge blanket of generalizations over this. What you typically see are certain wines at price points are fruit driven at lower price points because that's the flavor profile that you get when you don't have a lot of aging in oak, a lot of aging in general. And when you're producing wines at a lower price point for people that maybe, and this is not meant as a judgment, maybe less serious wine drinker. And I don't mean that as a judgment.
Actually, Lisa's asking about that too, so you can kind of address that a little bit.
What's she say? I can't read it. Let's pull my glasses.
She says, "What do you mean by more serious wines?"
Okay. Yeah. So when we say a wine is more serious, I look at it as the first two wines are simple, fruit driven, not particularly complex, not likely to improve drastically or change drastically even over the next, say, 3 to 5 years in bottle, and probably not meant to age more than 5 years from vintage date, 5-6 years from vintage date, maybe a little more. They're not going to get terrible, but they're just, the point of aging wine is to improve them. And I think a more serious wine is one that presents characteristics that develop after aging or as a result of winemaking techniques employed, such as more oak aging, such as really a lot of hand harvest, a lot of selected fruit, things from vineyards that have more of a name. Things are going to be a little bit pricey. They're going to be super complex as they age and develop, and will actually improve and change significantly over time. That's why I look at it as serious wines.
Yeah. So the majority of wines are meant to be drunk almost immediately. The average aging that the consumer does is from the time it gets to the front seat of your car to the time you get home.
Yeah.
So most wines are designed, made,
produced. Yep.
To do that.
And when we say most wines, we're not talking about most wines that we care. We're talking about the industry worldwide, the industry as a whole, that the vast majority of wines are really meant to be like drink now type of wines, meaning a wine gets released and it should generally, especially inexpensive wines, consumed within
5 years.
a year to 5 years from vintage date. There's not as a percentage of all of the wine in the market, there are not a ton of wines that are meant to age for that 5 to 10 year to 15 year bracket.
I want to expound on that a little bit, because when we go to California and we listen to what they say about Napa wines, and I'm a huge Napa fan. It is one of my favorites. When we hear that Napa produces less than 2% of all the California wines out there, that just gives you an idea. And we probably in our shop have, I'm going to 10% Napa wines. Probably 10% are from Napa. And in California only, Napa is only 2%, not even,
right,
of the wines produced. That gives you an idea of the volume of wine that's out there, and the volume of all price points of wine. I mean, there's a lot of price points of wine that are in probably the category we're in right now. $10 and under.
Yeah, probably $7.50 and under.
Yeah.
We're talking.
And there's nothing wrong with that at all. This is not a judgment. This is solely the wines that stop being whatever.
Well, there's a reason that we don't sell jug wine, and there's a reason that we don't sell box wine.
We don't. We've had some box wines that are a little bit nicer. There are some nicer box wines, but not.
Yeah. So just the volume of wine out there is incredible, and from all over the place, whether it's California or it's other countries. There's so much wine made, and the smaller percentages are those wines that we would consider like fine wines, if that makes sense.
Yes. So I don't know if that answered any of your questions, and there were a few of them in
Or
there.
if we were just sitting here babbling. Oh, you know what I didn't show? I didn't show this.
Okay, tell us what that is.
So that's a map of Portugal.
I'm gonna go get the dog while you're showing Portugal.
Okay. So that's a map of Portugal. I didn't show that before because we got screwed up with the volume. And anyway, so this is Portugal. So you got north to south, obviously on the right, on the left side where it says Lisboa Vino VR for Vino Regional. Those are the sub-appellations, the sub-regions within the Lisbon region or Lisboa region. So that right there along the coast, that sort of maroonish looking sort of reddish color is the area we're talking about. If you want to go to a really cool site, where I get a lot of my maps, and I don't think I'm a member currently, but the Society of Wine Educators, I'm going to give them credit since I use their maps all the time down here. Society of Wine Educators is the site. I can post a link in the notes here. But the Society of Wine Educators also does a couple of certifications. One being a certified wine educator, which is their upper echelon one. And then the certified specialist of wine, the CSW, is their sort of entry tier wine, which is still a lot.
The star of the show is here.
This is the dog.
She's not allowed to sit on my lap when I'm sitting, so this is special for her. But this is because we had people ask. This is Kat.
She's gotten bigger.
She's huge. Kat is 14 weeks. She looks just like mom, doesn't she? So I bring her out because this is Ron's cue that it is now time, because we are almost at the hour. So he's got to finish up his spiels and his talks. Talk about the next two tastings. This is Kat. Oh,
Hey, puppy dog.
not allowed to lick. Better than biting. She's bitey right now. She's in a bitey
she's very
stage.
bitey. Oh, there she is.
There she goes. That's her. I said it out loud, didn't I? No. So I have to go take her out because she just came out of her sleepy time. So Ron can finish up.
You gonna take her out?
I'll take her out.
All right. Means
So-
we're gonna sit here and drink for a little bit.
Yes. Good night,
All right.
everybody. If I don't see you, we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you for joining us. We enjoyed the wines. Enjoyed the little more serious conversation tonight, Ron. Nice job. But you got, 3 minutes to finish up. Good night.
I'm on the clock. Bye, Kat. All right. So hopefully you guys like the wines. I enjoyed these wines. These are wines that, we talk about like our Tuesday night wines, the wines that we're going to just sort of crack and enjoy, where it's not going to be like super crazy serious wines. Enjoy these wines for what they are. $9 a bottle. Great value. Great pizza wine, great burger wine, great easy like afternoon in the patio type wines. They are what they are. Hopefully you enjoyed them as well. Tuck that away. Well, I'll talk real briefly about the upcoming tastings. We've got on April 26th, we've got the California tasting, which we're going to do the Chard, the Cab, and a Zin. Should be a really nice tasting. Really nice wines. We've had those recently for the first time. And then don't forget that on May 17th, we're going to be in California. We're going to be in Sonoma. We're going to be broadcasting from, hopefully, well, as long as everything goes well, we're going to be broadcasting from the home of Clay and Carrie Morrison of Morrison Wines, where Clay and Carrie will hopefully sit down and taste through. We're going to do 4 wines. We haven't had them announced yet, and we haven't like set them out yet. We're probably going to be doing a Sauvignon Blanc, a rosé for sure, a Cabernet, and a Zin. And so we'll taste those. We might have, depending on what we decide to do, we might do a little bit older vintage of a Cabernet just to sort of mix that up. And of course, when we're there, Loreen and I are going to be tasting all of the current vintage stuff with Clay and Carrie, and really looking forward to that visit as well. So I think that's all I've got, unless there are any other burning questions. Thank you very much for tuning in tonight. Thanks for buying the wines. All of the wines for the 2 weeks from now, the California wines, all of them are ready. They're at both shops. They're set out with the tasting sheets, with the tech sheets. So you can feel free to pick those up anytime you want. Feel free to grab more of these. We are, with the Portugal wines, we're actually sort of working with one distributor that has a bunch of Portuguese wines. We're looking towards a trip, and so you'll probably start to see some more Portugal wines in the shop. We like them. We think they represent a really different segment of the wine industry that people sort of overlook and don't consider often enough. So you'll see those, and you should check them out for sure. And maybe someday we'll do an actual port in this as well. I think that's.
How much longer we have? COVID's almost over, hopefully.
Well, COVID's almost over. Loreen says COVID's almost over, so she doesn't want to do any more tastings after COVID is over. But I bet if we get enough feedback, we would do more tastings. So there you go. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Have a fabulous week. It's Monday. This is a great way to start the week for us and hopefully for you. And we will see you around the shop. Cheers.